Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to do the slab process to create your jar or container. Make sure you've wedged your clay, and then this is a favorite part of many. Take your clay, slam it down on the table. Do that a couple times just to make sure your air pockets are out. And it does help to have a piece of canvas on the table so your clay doesn't get stuck to the table. After you have that laid out, we're going to use the slab process, which is basically turning a round piece of clay into a flat piece. We'll use some rulers. You can use different things like slabs or slats of wood too. We're just going to use rulers because we have a lot of them available. And I'm putting 2 rulers thick on each side. So what this is going to do when the rolling pin is laying on it, the rolling pin will rest on it, and it'll just keep going until the rolling pin rests on it all the way across, and the clay will get rolled out, and it'll be the same thickness all the way through. If we didn't have the rolling pins there and rolled it, there might be some parts that were a little thicker than other parts and some that are thin. So the rulers makes it so it's the same thickness all the way through. When you put your rulers down, it's important to make sure they're close enough together that your rolling pin can rest on them. If you had one like this and one like that, it's kind of pointless having them there because the rolling pin will rest on the ground or on the mat right here. So make sure they're close enough that it rests on them. Start in the middle of your clay, roll it a few times, and flip it over. That's important so your clay won't get stuck. So roll it a few times, flip it. Roll it and flip it. Roll it and flip it. And you're going to keep doing that until your rolling pin is resting on the rulers, and you'll be able to hear it. So you can hear it. Hear that? Before we didn't hear that because it was just rolling on the clay. So you've got it all rolled out. You're done with the rolling pins and the rulers for a while. And then you're going to draw the shape of your base. There are lots of clay tools you can use. Some cheap, easy ones to get are toothpicks or plastic silverware, like plastic forks and plastic knives. There are some nicer clay tools too. I've got a couple wooden tools here, but you can easily do it with stuff you can find really cheap. So step 1 is to draw your base. If you draw it really lightly, then if you decide you don't like it, you can just rub it out with your finger, or you can dip your finger in some water. Now, this isn't really water, it's water mixed with clay. It's called Slip. It's kind of like glue for clay, and we'll be using that in a minute. So figure out the base that you like. After you draw it lightly and decide you like it, you can cut all the way through with your toothpick or switch to the knife, or if you only had a fork, you could use the end of the fork like this instead of the pokey end. I'm just going to use the knife here. I like to cut on the edge of my slab, and then you don't have to roll out new slabs quite as much. So there is my tiny little base. You can make it a little bit bigger. I'm just trying to conserve clay. Then to make a wall, I would recommend using the ruler so that your walls will all be the same height. If you don't use the ruler cutting on each side, your walls might be taller, some might be lower. Definitely use it to cut one side of your walls for sure, so it's straight. And then you could move it if you wanted to make a taller wall. I want mine to all be the same, so I'm just going to make it easy and slice on both sides of the ruler. So now I've got this slab, and I'm going to go ahead and cut another one here. Okay, so I've got those, and I want a straight end, so I'm going to trim that off. Okay, you have a couple choices. You can put your wall on the outside of this, so your opening here would be a little bit bigger, or you can put it on top like this. That would make it a little taller, but the opening will be pretty tiny, especially since this is tiny. Either one's fine. I'm going to put it around the outside, put a little mark here. So that's going to end up being one side, like that. Now when I lay out this side and mark it, it's going to have a little overlap. See that part that overlapped in the corner? So it'll be a little longer than the first piece, because adding that piece there added just that amount of thickness. So lay that out. This one, same thing. It's going to overlap a little in the corner. and mark the side. And it was a good thing I cut some extra, because this little piece I have left here, although it's the right distance for that side, that's pretty perfect, there's these parts are left off. So I'm going to take this other strip that I cut and line it up here, mark it out. It's also important when you mark it and cut it. Notice I marked it like this and then I laid it down and cut it. If you try to cut it this way, you squish some of your clay. So if you look at that, that's how they're going to fit together. But it's really important that you score and slip your clay so it stays together. If I just put it like this and squish it together, as it dries, it's going to fall apart. It also might have some little air pockets. So the best thing to do is score it and slip it. So where two pieces of clay are touching along this crack here, I'm going to score it with just scratching it. You can scratch it with your toothpick, with a clay tool, or I like to use a fork because it's like having 4 toothpicks in one. So I'm going to scratch where clay is going to touch clay. So right here, that piece is going to touch right here. Those are where those two will touch. And then put some slip in there. If you don't have slip, it's just water mixed with clay. Normally, the really good slip is down in the bottom. It's all mushy. You can take the watery stuff if you want, or get the good gooey stuff from the bottom and paint it on there. If you don't want to get your fingers dirty, you can take a knife and spread it like butter. Or if you don't have a knife, you can use the end of your fork. So you're going to put some slip on it, squish it together like that. And take your knife or the end of your fork and smooth out the seams. Get it really squished and sealed in there. Got that? Then flip it over also and smooth out that seam. I like to use the ridgy part of a plastic knife like that to really smooth it, like you're buttering a piece of toast. And then you can smooth out the ridges you created with your finger. So you can't even tell that there's a seam there. It's smoothed out. Okay, so the next wall is going to go right here. So you're going to score where clay is going to touch clay. So along two sides now. You got to score it here, and it's also going to touch here and here. Get some slip, butter it up there, squish it on here, and smooth out the seams. Smooth out that seam too. It should look like you didn't even have 2 pieces of clay. Now there's also a seam right here, which I'm using the ridgy part of the knife, but the ridges will smooth out. The ridges are kind of distributing the clay where there's too much and getting it put in the little cracks. So if I get my finger wet and rub it, you can get it so smooth you can't even tell it was separate pieces. Okay, so you're going to keep going with that, scoring everywhere clay touches clay, and putting some slip on it each time, smoothing it out each time, smooth the creases out. It works to use the knife better than your fingers sometimes because it's hard to get your fingers in those tiny little areas. Okay, so get all that smoothed like you're buttering toast. And then your final smoothing round, a finger works well if you can fit your finger. On the outside, obviously, it's easy, but the inside's a little trickier. Then this final side's going to touch, clay will touch clay in 3 parts. So score all 3 parts, score all 3 parts, slip it, butter it up there, stick it on there, and use the tip of your knife to smooth out the seams. Smooth, 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 smooth. Then I switch sides of my knife to the ridgy side of the knife. Okay, so your shapes, if it has sides, like a square, you're going to cut a slab for every side. If it's like a circle, you can just cut a slab and wrap it around there. So if this were a circle, I could just wrap this around and then get another piece when it got too short and wrap it around to make a circle. If it were a heart, you'd probably try to do it in 2 slabs to kind of be like that and smooth it together. So you'll have to adjust according to what your shape is. So you're going to get that all smoothed out. Make sure you can't see any seams. Smooth it with your fingers, smooth it with the tools. After that is just right, make sure you carve your name in the bottom of it. That works best with a toothpick. Carve your name or initials. And then I'm going to quick show you how to make a lid too. So you start with the slab. Turn your container upside down on the slab. Like that. Lightly trace around it, marking out where the lid ends. Like that. Slice it. Okay, and this obviously is a lid, but a problem with just using a plain slab for a lid is that it's not going to stay very well. It fits really nice, but it'll slide off easily. So you need to put some nubs on the inside of the lid that are going to catch it from sliding off. Your nubs, you can have a couple choices. You can make a nub, just a couple strips of clay that I can stick. If I stick one there and one there, then when it would start to slide, that nub's going to hit it and stop it from sliding off. You could do smaller nubs this way, or you can cut a smaller version of the shape, like I could just cut a smaller square and stick it there. And you'll have to score and slip those on there. Don't just think they're going to stay like that. You'll have to scratch it and scratch where you're going to stick it. Put some slip on it and smooth it on there just like you did before. So get it stuck really, really well. You can tell it's stuck well if you take your finger and you flick it and it doesn't go anywhere. This one's not stuck well. I can flick it and it goes right off. So get your nub stuck on there. Make sure your lid is good. And then you can add things to the top of your lid, like animals or something like that. There you go. That was it in a nutshell. Best wishes.